Russell Wilson. He might be here in Denver this year. Let's just start with the juice. Russell Wilson, Todd. The door has been left open for him to return, and we have a lot of clips from George Paton, Sean Payton, and Greg Penner talking about potential, I want to say reunion for Russ, but he hasn't actually left yet. It just feels like he's left because it was just so much assumed that, okay, Russ is gone, let's move on. Where are the Broncos going to go? How are they going to divide his dead cap? That's not what the Broncos are saying yet.
Yeah, it feels like a door is open. It doesn't feel like the front door. Maybe the back door, the side door, little doggy door. I'm not sure which way he's entering the house again, but it doesn't feel like he's getting the warm welcome and the welcome mat at the front door.
Todd, that is such a good analogy because kind of the feeling I got after today and putting it in these terms is Russ is going to have to crawl through the doggy door if he wants to come back. But they haven't locked that. They haven't locked that door. They've locked the main door, which is, the 2 or 5 year, $250 million cut. No, that's not happening. Russ isn't returning with that deal. But maybe if Russ were to really change things on his end, that's what would happen. That's such a good way to put it, Todd.
Yeah, man. I think it's a sticky situation because, if he comes back, it literally means that the team has done every bit of due diligence of how they can kind of like move on from this situation and realize none of this is going to work. All right, come back into the fold. Or, like you said, Russ has to make some significant change to his contract to be able to make it work for the team. So it's a really tough situation to be in.
Yeah, it is. And let's actually just hear straight from George Paton. This is the first time we've talked to George Paton since cut day back in training camp. This is the first time we've talked to Sean in 48 hours, but really the first time we've got to ask big picture conversations. So you hear, dial up some of these for us.
Yeah, listen, otherwise it would have been like, hey, goodbye, and and so I said that, I think, to you guys way back when. We'll look at all the scenarios and try to do what's best for the Broncos, but communication will be important, and that final decision hasn't been made.
And that was, of course, Sean talking about, is there a chance that Russ returns? And he goes, yeah, there is. And one of the things that Sean told us today, which is important to set the scene for not only this conversation about Russ, but for this conversation about the entire team, George Paton, any coaches that may or may not come back. What Sean likes to do is they kind of work a little bit this week, the coaches do, kind of season wrap-up things, but not season review. Then the entire coaching staff takes next week off, and then they come back the following week, and that's when they get into grading the season, how they think players did, how they think coaches did, how they think personnel did, and then they make decisions. Okay, are we firing any coaches? Are we moving on from any players that we need to do now instead of in a month from now, or something like that? And so that's why we haven't heard any news on a coach or two being let go, on why maybe there's been a lot of speculation on George Paton's future with the team. And Sean said that they have not made that decision yet on Russell Wilson's future.
I think it's important to take that step back and kind of decompress from the season because too often you kind of remember like the last thing that happened. Yeah. And that being the Raiders game. If a guy had a bad game, you start thinking, man, this guy's trash. We need to let him go. And then you look back over the whole season. Right. You're like, oh, he had a pretty good year. Maybe we should bring him back and start working with him. So
honestly, like Cortland.
Yeah.
Like he probably had his worst game of the season this past game. And overall, you're not moving on from him because of that last game.
Not at all. Cortland was the best player on offense we had by far. Not even a close shot.
And so maybe that's the reason why the door is left open for Russ, is because, well, they haven't done their reviews on everyone. So in just 2 weeks, we'll let you know, Russ. But Sean had more comments. Let's hear the other clip from Sean talking about Russ right now.
There's so many things that go into a decision specific to the quarterback, which is significant, obviously. So it's too early at all. I spent half an hour with Russ yesterday. And I told him, I said, look, I don't think it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, but it hasn't been decided relative to what our plans are. And but as soon as we know something that certainly, he would be the first to know.
to add to what Sean just said as well, then he was asked to follow up. Well, you met with Russ yesterday. Like, how was the tone? And are you really sure you haven't made the decision whether he's coming back? And he said, if we had made that decision that he wasn't coming back, I would have said goodbye to him in our meeting yesterday. So I really do think there are things they're working through in order to see if that's the best option. And one of the things George Payton said too was, we've worked with our cap guy, Rich Hurtado, too. He didn't say these exact words, but if we move on from Russ, we know how bad the cap situation is. We know what we'll have to work with and really won't have to work with. And if we do bring Russ back, we know exactly what we're going to have to work with. Todd, the feeling I'm getting is Russ, they are open to having Russ back.
Yep.
At a Walmart type of deal.
A rollback.
Yo, roll back. We're rolling this thing back to like 1980s prices. If he's willing to take a massive pay cut, that actually probably is better for the Broncos than having $80 million in dead cap over these next 2 years, or all of it this year.
Yeah, I don't know why he would though. Like, personally, as a player, even if I want to play football again next year, I don't want to play at a discount, especially when you've worked so hard to build up your name and legacy this whole time. Like, you want the money, kind of, you get it on the back end for most guys. And I feel like he's just in a tough situation because now, if I don't know if I'm going to be here, usually when you clean out your locker and you know you're going to be there next year, you leave a couple pairs of shoes, you leave some workout gear. You're like, I'll get it OTAs. But for him, I don't know, did he leave anything in his locker? Did he just clear it all out because you don't know? And then he has a house that he bought here. Like, what does he do as far as like positioning that to hit the market? If he wants to sell, if he has to leave? It's a sticky situation all the way around.
No, but Todd, here's what, Todd the player, you can not be on the Broncos, and you can go get that money somewhere else. Or you can be on the Broncos for a 10th of your salary. How appealing is that?
No, thank you. Not at all. I think his record was 11-29.
11-19. I think.
Yeah. No. I'm out of here.
and obviously we know that Sean doesn't view him as a $50 million quarterback. You don't bench a $50 million quarterback if you think he's playing anywhere close to that.
Yep.
So I think Sean says, man, we're totally effed with his cap hit if we just move on from him and cut him. But I don't want him as my quarterback here. So I think that's kind of what they're dealing with.
Yep.
Is, can they get Russ back at the right price for both sides? But we've already seen both sides try to negotiate earlier in the season, and one side said, here's an offer, would you take it? And the other side said, F you, hell no, no way, we're not touching that. I think that's probably how these negotiations go this offseason, and it probably will lead to Russ being let go from the team in 2 to 4 weeks from now. But that's kind of what we're hearing. So on this situation, we talked to George Payton for the first time about all of this today, and here's some things that George had to say about his conversations with Russ and Russ's future in town.
I think Sean commented on that. We really have. This meeting's a deep dive in the entire roster. The door remains open with Russ. I've had good conversations with Russ. Sean's had good conversations. The door is open. And so we'll just kind of get through the process. We'll visit as you know, with the coaching staff, scouting staff. We'll visit with Russ and his people, and we'll go from there.
Which door is open, Todd?
Yeah, the side door for sure. I feel like for him, for Russ, another point is that if they were willing to bench me and I was guaranteed money and had all this money in my contract, if I took a pay cut, how much more am I on thin ice? Like, I make one bad play, then I'm probably on the sideline the rest of the year. I'm not signing up for that.
Yep, especially when the backup was Jarrett Stidham, and no disrespect for Jarrett Stidham, he had started 2 games in his first 4 years in the NFL,
Yep.
And that came when a team didn't want to pay their starting quarterback. They just sent him home and said, okay, our next guy up's Jarrett. So you're 100% right there. And Sean or George had one more thing to say about this contract situation that I want to get into as well.
I've talked to Russ. He's open to returning.
As quick as that.
Quick and to the point, baby.
Russ is open to returning. 2 weeks ago, Russ stood at his locker and talked to us for the first time since being benched and said, I want to return. He said it many times. And then he circled back and said, I genuinely want to return. I moved my family here. I bought the most, he didn't say this part, but I bought the most expensive house in Denver ever here. He said, I put my roots here. I genuinely want to be here. And Todd, you call BS on that. So do you think he was BSing with George when he said he wants to be here too?
I think you got to play the PR game. You know what I'm saying? You got to keep all lines of communication open, and it's business at the end of the day. So if there is something to be worked out to where I can get good money and stay, okay, maybe I do want to stay. I remember when I was leaving the Saints, coming here for the Broncos, and they had already put me up on waivers, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was gone. One of the coaches asked me, like, if you could stay, would you stay? At the time, we had a losing record. The Broncos were the number one team in the AFC, number one seed. We were about to go to the playoffs. I'm like, heck yeah, I wish I could stay. I wish I could be here, but they claimed me. And all in my head, I'm like, I can't wait to go to Denver. So I think he's playing the game.
Because you keep all the doors open, right?
Exactly.
Like, just in case the Broncos, the Saints trade for you in 2 weeks, you don't want to burn that bridge before leaving. So it is smart. And then you know what? Russ might want to be back in Denver on the deal that he's on right now. Do you think you would be okay mending some fences if they're like, you know what? Keep the 250. We'll bring you back. Then it's probably like, yeah, that is a situation Russ wants to be back in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can all be friends. We can go have a little kumbaya and drink some beer. We can get over this.
Speaking of kumbayas, can you believe Russ and Sean had a 30-minute meeting yesterday? Is that... You call BS on that?
No, they probably had a good meeting. I don't know what 30 minutes gets you after all of this that has went on.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if it really led to the real potential of him coming back.
So Todd, that's where I am right now. Is I think Russ is okay with coming back on the current contract, and I think the Broncos are okay with Russ coming back at a massive, massive pay cut.
Yep.
So I don't think when it comes to this conversation, we were lied to today. And I do think that Sean Payton was in full in-season mode as of like 36 hours ago. He probably just started thinking of the offseason yesterday. And I do take him for his word that he doesn't do any true evaluations until he comes back from that time off, so it's not an emotional decision one way or the other, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. And I also think that Sean did not really like Russ as a player that much. So I do think it was a football decision when he benched him. And he was just viewing it as, look, we're 2 games away from making the playoffs, so we can win these final 2. So I do believe Sean benched Russ, but for Jarrett Stidham in that situation, and wasn't looking at the big picture of what the implications are 3 years down the line. And so I just think now he might be saying, damn, $80 million in dead cap, even though I don't like him as my starting quarterback, that will cripple this franchise for this year. So maybe he's taking a step back now and saying, if there's a way to eliminate the $80 million in dead cap and bring Russ back, I can work with him at a price. I just think at the end of the day, that price is going to be way different than what Russ is thinking.
I think so too. I know Sean is smart, so he understands how that cap is going to impact him and the team. And I know he wants to win here, but sometimes when you have that big cap hit looming over your head, you can only do so much. Like, your hands are kind of tied. So he wants to make the best decision so that he can be successful. Because when he's successful, he gets paid more. The team does good. You know, everybody's talking about how great of a coach he is once again, and so he definitely wants to have a much better season next year than he did this year.
Yeah, and Sean said he had a very interesting comment today. Remember how we heard that Sean was going to be really pissed off if the Broncos weren't a playoff team this year? We heard it in a Jarrett Bell USA Today national interview. He referenced that today and said, that maybe shouldn't have been out there.
Exactly.
You got a reporter in the room with his recorder out. It's probably going to be in there. So that was a little shot taken there by Sean. And he said that this year was disappointing, and he still believes that this team could have been a playoff team. So he views it as a disappointing season. And in terms of how he views his season, he says, you are what your record is. And that's exactly what every person in this industry is going to tell you. So I was an 8-9 coach and had some things to improve there.